I'm going to talk about bridging the IT security gap, which is a topic that's been of big interest for me lately. So here we go. The big problem that I've seen is that we really have communication problems, whether it be speaking different languages, different perspectives, or just outright hostility between the two teams. We need to figure out how to communicate better, and that's what I really want to talk about with this. A big part of it does come from IT, tends to be we want to open up everything. We want everything to flow as it wants to and not put any controls over it, which can lead to chaos. Security, on the other hand, is there to truly control things and make sure that things are moving the way they should be moving, which does require us to sometimes say no. Now, the Department of No we talked about earlier today quite a bit, and I don't know, I didn't find a good image for this, so I just took a screenshot of the search, and it was all government agencies for some reason. Department of Defense being the biggest one here, which I found kind of ironic. So I said, okay, cool. Department of No, we've heard that a lot, and security is oftentimes viewed that way, but they do say no. I mean, that's part of what they need to be there for. But they also say yes. And I love this image of the traffic cop because he initially stopped and then said, okay, now this other side can go. And that's the important thing with security that we all have to keep in mind is that we have to accept no sometimes, but it's never going to be a flat no, because it's important to work together along with the business as well. We can't ignore the business. We can't look away from them when they're trying to tell us something. We need to listen to them, and we need to work together in a partnership across IT, security, and the business to make sure that we're putting the whole thing together in a way that works for the business, because we're there to enable it. So one great example I found recently is with backups. There's a lot of room for collaboration when we start talking about the backup infrastructure itself. There's a lot of good data that can support security through its entire life cycle. So one of the key things end up being around the actual machines, the actual data that we need to protect. And that data is cataloged. It's sometimes got the information about priorities, which ones have to be backed up more often, which ones need to be restored first. That should all be cataloged in our backup infrastructure today, and is a huge data point for security to use in order to properly arrange the security situation. We talk about where the backups are stored. That's a huge trove of information. If I were writing ransomware and you're starting to see this in reality, that's where they're going to go because all the data is there in one place. Let's go get it. Not to mention that it makes it easier for ransomware to work and all that kind of stuff too. When we talk about the processing of the data, there's a lot of opportunity to investigate what's going on with that data. If you see, if a ransomware breaks out, the backup infrastructure is going to find it within 24 hours. They're going to start seeing it because there's going to be a massive amount of change that they'll detect. We can also use the backup repository itself to see that and to run analysis within that data. That data, of course, can then be huge for the digital forensics side of things. Like, when did this first get into our environment? We can go back to those points in time and rewind time and find out when it showed up and how long it's been there. And then, of course, the recovery aspect of things is the main place where backups come into play in cybersecurity. We all know this from a ransomware perspective. It's the ultimate backstop. It's the place we go when everything else has failed to stop it, to clean it up, whatever it might be. We go to the backups and we say restore it all, and we replace the good data there. Now, of course, we need to do some investigation to make sure it's actually clean, and that helps a lot. So for the rest of this, I want to talk about how to speak security. So a bit of a Rosetta Stone for those of us that come from the IT side of things, how to talk to the security side. So frameworks, they talk a lot about frameworks. These are three, there's others, but these are the three that you probably see the most commonly. The NIST cybersecurity framework, I think, is the easiest one for us all to understand. And that's kind of what, when I talked about the backup example, I put it into these 5 categories. Exfiltration is a big one. They take the data, if they can get to the data to encrypt it, they can take the data away. And they're generally going to do that first. And they're going to fling it out to their cloud and collect that data. And this is where you get multiple extortion schemes that happen after the ransomware gets fixed. Indicators of compromise. This is a place where IT can be a huge benefit to security because we are there seeing what's going on in the environment. We know what normal is. And when something strange is afoot, we can see that. And again, that goes back to that example with the backup infrastructure. And those are called indicators of compromise. Dwell time is an interesting one because the longer a malware sits in the environment, the further it's going to spread, the deeper it's going to go, and the harder it's going to be to take out. Those of us in IT are used to the recovery point objective. How far back do we need to go to avoid it? by cutting down dwell time, we shorten that recovery point objective. Now, reaction time is a big one too, because the longer it's there, once we find it, the more damage it's going to do. And so we need to react quickly, and that plays into our traditional recovery time objective, where we need to get back up and running as quickly as possible. Means we need to find it quick and we need to react to it quick. So in summary, we're all Sneetches on a beach, and we all have to realize that just because one person in the organization has a star upon our, and we might not, we still need to work together because we're still on the same team, we're still coming from the same place, we still have the same goal, which is to protect our environment and make it useful.
Since you specifically mentioned the backup example, what do you think about the fact that a lot of companies are starting to do entropy detection to figure out indicators of compromise? Like all of a sudden, all of my data is uncompressible because it just got encrypted.
So you just went and used every buzzword that I used and compressed it into one question. I like it.
Yeah.
I think it's huge. I think it's the next big thing for backup vendors to do, and to make it operational, and then to, more importantly, tie it into the systems that a security team would use, like a SIM, putting it into those workflows so that we reduce that, again, that reaction time. Once we found an indicator of compromise, we need to get it into that workflow as soon as possible, which means we can't wait for some backup administrator to wait till the email the next morning to say, oh wait, there was something that happened here, and walk it over to the security team and then talk about it. It's got to flow straight into there and create an alert as quickly as possible.
Do you think then it's the backup vendor, we should give the responsibility to the backup vendor to control what's detected, how it's detected, or do you think the better model is for the backup vendor to open it up for specialist security software to be able to grab those blocks as they're written or whatever?
That's an interesting question. I like it. I think it's got to be customizable, because the backup or the security team is going to have their processes, their procedures, and it's got to fit into that workflow. It's got to feed into that as directly as possible, because they're the ones that oftentimes need to react first. They're the ones that will be in control of that whole process. They're not going to be the only ones. IT is going to need a warning sign. They should raise the flag for themselves as well to say, "Oh, something's going on. I better be prepared for that call to get onto the bridge to deal with that group decision that needs to happen there." But I think ultimately it's got to fit into whatever the security team is using, which means it's going to have some flexibility in it.
Now, a backup for me is always a reactive thing. So the problem happened, and then the backup will get my data back from a certain point in time.
Mhm.
Isn't it better to think more proactively so that security should do more knows to avoid that the problem actually happens?
I think that's an important question for IT and security to sit down in a room and discuss based on the different types of data. Because a web server, that's not going to change on a weekly basis, much less a daily or hourly basis. However, that database that is a real-time database is going to change constantly. So different policies need to be applied to the two. And the thought process of how are we going to be able to restore it in different increments in order to, and the analysis of the whole situation, all that analysis that goes into that kind of response phase could be like having different increments of backups than you need for pure recovery. There may be advantages to taking more frequent backups just so that you have the data to analyze in that situation. So, not only is the business going to determine what the frequency of backups are going to be, but the security team may have some input in there that is going to increase that frequency as well.
Mhm.
So again, work together.